Up now we have a really special fireside chat followed by, presentation followed by fireside chat. So I want to introduce to you the wonderful Elizabeth Stark. You probably know her. She is, of course, the CEO and co-founder of Lightning Labs. She is helping to implement Lightning Network on blockchains such as Bitcoin, Litecoin, other coins. So she'll be giving a presentation to start off with, and then she'll be joined on stage by Andrew Yang, the COO of BlockFuse and the author of the book Understanding Litecoin. He is also a very active volunteer with the Litecoin Foundation. So to start off with, please give Elizabeth Stark a very warm welcome to the stage.
Thank you so much, Naomi. First off, I want to thank the Litecoin Foundation and the Litecoin community for putting together this great event. So please, let's give them a round of applause. Thanks, everyone. And it's really exciting to be here today to talk a little bit more about all the progress that we've made on Lightning Network and really building and shipping. There's been a lot going on in the last year in terms of the cryptocurrency world, and we've been focused on putting this technology out to the world. So the year is 2008, and a pseudonymous individual going by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto, clearly not this Satoshi Nakamoto, released a white paper to the world with basically little to no fanfare. No one really cared at the time. October 31st, 2008, we're coming up on the 10th anniversary. And this was a big deal. It was peer-to-peer electronic cash, but the initial response to the Satoshi white paper was from an individual that said, hey, this sounds cool, but I don't think it can really scale. Basically, cool story, but doesn't scale. So along comes a proposal called the Lightning Network by two members of the Bitcoin community. And the basic concept was to create a series of contracts on top of Bitcoin that would create a second layer on top of it using a technology called payment channels. And what this would do is it would enable instant high-volume transacting on the second layer with the security of the base layer. So how does Lightning work? So we have good old Alice and Bob. These are our friends in the world of cryptography. And they create a 2 out of 2 multi-signature entry on the blockchain. And Alice might put in $10 of Litecoin, Bob might put in $10 of Litecoin, and they create this multi-sig entry. So this is how they get onto Lightning. It's the on-ramp onto Lightning. So once they do that, they have to wait for blockchain confirmations, one or a few. Then they're onto this layer 2. Now, Alice and Bob can transact instantly at this point. So maybe Alice would have 5, and Bob would have 15, and then they have 10 and 10 again, and then Bob has 11, Alice has 9. They go back and forth, and they can do so instantly. And each time they're doing this, they sign off on the transactions. They keep signing. They have to agree they keep signing. One very important part of Lightning is each time they sign a new state, they revoke the previous old state such that it's no longer valid, and we'll see why that matters in a second. So Alice and Bob can keep paying each other. It's instant. It's awesome. The fees are really low. Great. But maybe Alice and Bob only see each other, once a year, so it's not all that useful for Alice to pay Bob. Well, actually, now we can have, Alice, Bob, Carol, Dave, and Aaron, and if Alice wants to pay Aaron, she can do so using Lightning, and this is one of the key elements of this technology. So the way it works is we actually use technology called a hash time lock contract, and all the intermediate nodes can only receive the funds if and only if they've already forwarded it onward, meaning that they can't just go off and steal the money. And either this transaction completes entirely or it goes back to the sender. But in nearly all cases, we call this multi-hop transacting. It'll just go through near instantaneously direct to the recipient, and you can transact. So if you think of the way that packets are routed as on the internet, Lightning is the equivalent for payments using cryptocurrency like Bitcoin and Litecoin. So one of the key elements is here, for example, how many people have heard of an exchange that got hacked, right? We see many of these scenarios as of late. Well, in this case, you don't have the counterparty risk because the other party cannot actually steal your funds, in part due to these contracts that are enforced on the blockchain. For example, let's say that Alice were to go offline. She's really sick of the internet. Things are going crazy in the cryptocurrency world. She wants to go to Desert Island, no internet. But, Bob still wants to get his money back because they had this payment channel open. Well, the cool thing about Lightning is using these contracts, Bob can broadcast his transaction to the blockchain. He has to wait a certain amount of time, and we'll see why in a second. And then after this parameter that's set by the software, Bob gets his money back, and then Alice has her money back, and everyone is made whole. And that's great, because actually, even if Alice is gone, Bob can still get his funds. Now let's say Bob is being sneaky, and Bob wants to try to cheat Alice out of her money. Well, the only way Bob can do that is by using an outdated state. Remember how we saw previously that there are old states. You can't make up a state that never existed, but you could try to broadcast an outdated one. So Bob modifies the software, because our software deletes it, and then tries to broadcast an old state. Well, it turns out not only does Alice's software or any number of other what we call watchtowers see this, Alice gets her money back and all of Bob's money, because Bob tried to cheat. And this is really powerful. It's a built-in game theoretic disincentive to cheat, because if you try to cheat, not only are you going to lose all your money, but the other party will get their money back anyway. And these are the contracts that Lightning enforces on the blockchain. So one of the main goals of this is creating this peer-to-peer network where you removed a trusted financial intermediary. In the past, we had, say, correspondent banks. In this case, we don't have to trust the people that we're transacting through, and they can't actually steal the funds. So the way that Lightning works is that the blockchain is the underlying security layer, the base layer blockchain. It can be Bitcoin, it can be Litecoin. And it functions as this dispute resolution mechanism. As we saw, Alice and Bob can broadcast their transactions to the blockchain. And effectively, it's a global decentralized judge that cannot be bribed. If you think of Lightning transactions as contracts, well, not all contracts go to court. Maybe you sign one with your job or your lease. Typically, you're not going to go to court. In the case that it does, the blockchain enforces it. But unlike a judge, it can't be bribed. There's no decision to be made, because these are pre-signed contracts, and we already know how the blockchain is going to interpret it. And that's part of what's so powerful about this technology. So as I'm sure many in the Litecoin community know, not only can Lightning be used on, say, the Bitcoin or the Litecoin blockchain, it can actually be used across blockchains. So here we have Alice and Bob. Alice has Bitcoin, Bob may have Litecoin, and here's an intermediary, maybe a market maker that's going to set an exchange rate between them. And Lightning can actually be used for these two parties to transact off-chain using these payment channels on both blockchains in a hash time lock contract between each other to have instant transacting between currencies without having to rely on a trusted exchange or central intermediary. So this is quite huge and quite significant for this community. So using Lightning technology, things that we can do, for example, are build decentralized asset exchanges. We've seen a few proposals already in the works this year. High volume transacting and trading. So, Bitcoin and Litecoin can do, maybe in the tens, if we're lucky, of transactions per second. Lightning can do many thousands of transactions per second, so that can be very useful in terms of trading. And of course, in terms of high volume, say machine to machine, say smart micropayments, given a certain condition, execute on the basis of that payment. So much like the technology, in our entire space, my company, Lightning Labs, has built an implementation of the Lightning Network. It is fully open source. It's called LND. Here is a screenshot from today. We now have over 3,000 GitHub likes, so we're psyched about that. And so back in March, that was a pretty big time for us over at Lightning Labs. So in January of 2017, we released the alpha version of LND, or Lightning Network implementation. And it was for Bitcoin testnet. And a lot of people went on and were testing it, and there was a great community that evolved. But people really wanted to use it with real Bitcoin. So in March, I think our team, we didn't really sleep for a week. It was kind of a crazy time, but we released the first ever mainnet beta for use with real Bitcoin and LND. And then just today, we're not stopping in terms of shipping. We released, back in March was 0.4. We had a few releases in between. Today we released LND 0.5 beta. So that was a big milestone for us. It increases privacy. It has better reliability. It has better like client support, and a lot of cool new features that are in there, of course, fixing a ton of bugs. And our community has been incredible in terms of reporting them, submitting GitHub PRs, and the like. So now, Lightning wouldn't really work if everyone were on their own standards. So interoperability has been a big focus for us. And there are multiple implementations out there. For example, there's one called Eclair, from a French startup. There's one called C-Lightning from Blockstream. There are a few in Japan that are in development. There's one in the Rust language that Bitcoin developer Matt Corallo is working on. So we all came together and created this interoperable specification called the Bolt spec. And we were all working on making our software talk to each other because, again, we want this to be this interoperable network. It's the Lightning Network, like the internet. We want everything to be able to talk to each other. So back in December, we had a big milestone where we had the first interoperable payments between these implementations, showing that this specification worked and that compatibility had been achieved. Now, what would open source technology be without developers and without building applications? So this, as mentioned, has been a big week for us. Earlier this week, we released a complete redesign and a new version of our Lightning desktop application over at Lightning Labs. Here you can see there's a cool purple UI that our designer came up with. And here we have a video. Let's see if it'll play. Video? All right. It's tough to get these videos working, despite being techies. Well, what you would see here is using our app to buy a fake beer, because people in the Bitcoin world love coffee. Well, actually, our German developer decided he was going to have the German version of coffee, which was beer. So you guys can check it out on our Twitter account for the video of that. And then our new application uses a technology called Neutrino, which is a light client. Now, typically, in the past, to run a Lightning node, you had to run a full node of Bitcoin or Litecoin. As a result, you have to download the prior history of transactions. And unfortunately, that can take quite a while, and it's not necessarily going to work, say, on a mobile phone. So one of the big additions to our new release here is technology called Neutrino, which is a new type of light client that improves user privacy. If people are familiar with the concept of SPV, this is something similar, but with far better user privacy. And our new release has that inside, along with the app. A Lightning developer and community member named Jack Mullers got LND running on his phone back even last fall with Neutrino and was able to purchase on a site called Bitrefill. So as we discussed, Lightning can enable instant high-volume transacting. And of course, the merchant element is really important for this. So we are providing a platform for merchants. So as mentioned, the day, March 15th, that we released our mainnet beta, Bitrefill had actually been testing on testnet, so people were buying, say, cell phone minutes with testnet and Steam credits and things of the like. So actually, we didn't tell them we were about to release, and within an hour or two, they were able to turn on, mainnet transactions for Bitrefill. So this is really cool. And actually, the day after, we purchased real cell phone minutes in a demo, and I actually viewed my co-founder, sending the Lightning payment, and it worked instantaneously. And it was one of these feelings like, wow, this really works. Like, we've been working on this for years, and actually, bam, it's right there, and it works. So that was a big deal. There's also an open source payment processing software named Btc Pay that's out there. I know Nicolas Dorier, BTC Rockstar, there are quite a few really great developers. So they have integrated LND support. So a lot of folks are now using Btc Pay for merchant processing. And they added Litecoin support back in December. So they have LND for Bitcoin and Litecoin with Btc Pay, which is a big deal. And then, is anyone from CoinGate here in the room? Nice. So we had this announcement come recently as well, where they now support 4,000 merchants that can pay with Lightning, which is a huge deal. I mean, the amount of progress that we've seen in the past year, we've been blown away. Like, we didn't even expect this degree of it. So that was a big and exciting milestone as well. So one of the major things that Lightning can do is it serves as an application layer for Bitcoin and Litecoin. So for example, Alex Bosworth is a Lightning developer who actually recently joined our team. He created this website called Y'alls. My co-founder Lalo actually named it. He grew up in part in the South. And it's an article micropayment site. So you can pay to read an article or to add reactions to the article. Here we have the Sap Wallet created by the developer I mentioned, Jack Mullers. Sap is a desktop wallet for Lightning. They're also working on a mobile version. They have Bitcoin and Litecoin support. And then in June of this year, a website came along. How many people heard of this website called Satoshi's Place? OK. And it was quite interesting. So if people know about the $1 million homepage back in the day, it was this website where you could actually pay per pixel to paint an image on the site. So somebody thought, OK, this will be a great example for the Lightning Network. So someone created Satoshi's Place, where you paid 1 Satoshi per pixel, and you could draw on it. So of course, what happened, but it was complete mayhem. It actually was, I struggled to get a safe for work version. This is somewhat safe for work. And my image went up there, and there were kind of various fights, because people would overwrite in pixels. And then, at one point, somebody put this whole FBI warning on it. They overtook the entire canvas, and somebody had saved the previous version. So there were these pixel wars going on, and they reverted it back. And what was so exciting and compelling about this to me was this was the first time where people really saw that Lightning worked as a technology. They were able to get wallets. They were sending real Bitcoin. They were paying 1 Satoshi, which is 0.006 of a cent per pixel. And it worked. And then we saw all this creativity emerge, and frankly, we, as I said, we're keeping Bitcoin weird with all this stuff that went on to Satoshi's Place. So, of course, the Litecoin community came on board and created Litoshi's Place. So here's the Litecoin version. You can see the Litecoin community is quite a bit friendlier than the Bitcoin community here with the images we have. So as mentioned before, one of the exciting aspects of Lightning, and one thing I know the Litecoin community is really passionate about, is this concept of cross-chain swaps. So back in May of last year, we released LND with Litecoin support. And this was a big deal. And I don't know how many folks remember, but there was a big debate within the Bitcoin community from some parts around segregated witness, this upgrade to Bitcoin. And the Litecoin community came around and said, OK, we're going to activate segregated witness. And this was huge for us because this actually showed, we all knew it was going to work, but the tech worked, Litecoin had integrated it, and Lightning needed segregated witness to function really well. If we had done it without it, it would have been bad software. So we said, Lightning needs segregated witness. So we integrated Litecoin support for LND, released that. That was a big milestone. And then back in November of last year, we actually, our engineer Connor from Next worked, he's like our swaps person, on the first ever Lightning cross-chain atomic swap between Bitcoin and Litecoin. And this is big news because we heard a lot of discussion around the concept of decentralized exchange technology, but I don't think a lot of people really knew that Lightning had this capability. So what's the best way to show the world, but actually build it? So we demoed that, and I know this was very popular amongst, Charlie tweeted a bunch about it, and it was really exciting to see the possibilities emerge in that regard. And so one thing that we've also seen evolve over, say, the past 6 months is really building out the network of Lightning and having this peer-to-peer network where we have various peers connected to each other. So back in the days of testnet, we had a lot of community members contributing. For example, we have several thousand people on the LND Slack. So there are all these people that are running nodes, and they're helping to route. And you can see a picture of the map here. And then after the mainnet betas and all the major releases had mainnet betas, where then people are using Lightning on the main network, I actually took this photo today. And some interesting aspects of, so this is coming from an explorer, so you can actually look at the Lightning network. But some important points to note are, first of all, not every node is going to advertise. So unlike a blockchain explorer, where you will actually see every transaction, because that's what a blockchain is, you'll see every single transaction. In this case, only some of the nodes will advertise. So the network is growing and will continue to grow, but the numbers may not grow as much because not everyone will be known to the network. And then also one important point here is there are names for the nodes, which is really cool, but the names are not unique. So one day somebody comes along and they created a Google node, and somebody said, oh my God, Google's on the Lightning network. Of course, I can just create the Google node, and then somebody else can create one. So those are fun names. But the important point here is that this is a peer-to-peer decentralized network with people coming online, running nodes. We actually saw in the past week or two, people are now selling hardware where you have a Raspberry Pi with LND. There's the Casa Lightning node. And people are just getting engaged and contributing to the network and the community, which has been incredible for me to see, and for the entire community over the past 12 months. So this is an image that really struck me when I first saw it, because here we have, the internet circa 1969, and there were really only a few nodes. And of course, we know where everything went today. So to me, this is, the beginning of a very long and exciting history ahead of us. And we're at the early days. It's clunky. Right now, a lot of people are it's very DIY. They're running their nodes. But I can't wait until what happens next. So thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Yang, and we're going to have a little bit of a chat and talk more about the Lightning Network. And then I'll ask her some questions, and afterwards, maybe we can ask the audience to ask us some questions, too. So first of all, I think this is the question that everyone has on their minds. Does the Lightning Network have a token, and when is the ICO?
So it's called, we have a few different tokens, no.
Oh, okay.
No, Lightning Sparks is coming to an ERC20 token near you. No, not actually. There's no token for the Lightning Network. I've repeatedly tweeted jokes around that.
Yeah.
But Lightning uses the underlying blockchain. So we have Lightning running on Litecoin, Lightning running on Bitcoin. There's some people working on Lightning implementations for other currencies. It is always going to be a transaction of the base blockchain it's working on. some people actually, like, there are a few of these. They tried to announce Lightning ICOs and pretend that they were us. And so we had to warn them, anything can happen on the internet. But no, there is no Lightning ICO.
Yeah, that's pretty frustrating. I think there's like a subreddit called r Lightning, and then there are people who are asking, so where do I buy these tokens to like utilize the Lightning
we
network?
got like hundreds of emails, especially around peak ICO time. And people were like, where can I buy the Lightning token? And then there was also one of these, I call them IFOs, initial fork offerings. So, there was obviously Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Candy, Bitcoin Super. There was one called Bitcoin Lightning, and we were like, we have nothing to do with this.
Oh my gosh.
So no, there will be no token and no separate currency for Lightning.
Okay, cool. Thanks for clarifying that, because sometimes yeah. Another question I had is, so what was one of the reasons why Lightning Labs decided to not only add Litecoin support, but to maintain it? I know you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier.
Yeah, so for those that were involved in the cryptocurrency community, and I'd say 2016 and 2017, so Segregated Witness was actually, I'd say, the first controversial soft fork in Bitcoin. In the past, the soft fork upgrade process was one where it would take a little while, but it was just considered standard, and miners would signal and then upgrade, right? So SegWit was really the first where there was some degree of contention within the community, and the process that we had built around that with the various BIPs was not designed for that. So there was a lot of drama going on, but so, as mentioned, SegWit was needed for Lightning to work properly, and I think the Litecoin community really acknowledged that, and I know Charlie was a big fan of that, and he was advocating in a lot of the developers in the Litecoin community. So the fact that Litecoin activated SegWit, I think, was really important for Lightning and really important for the Bitcoin community more broadly, because we saw, the tech work, we saw that it could get activated, and from our end, I knew this was coming, and I said, okay, we're adding Litecoin support. We know the community's excited about this. And we had the whole 2 chains thing in our blog post. And I think we really got a lot of the support, and it was really important.
Yeah, and I think on behalf of the Litecoin community, I appreciate so much that, you guys could have just abandoned it after, but you guys are rigorously maintaining Litecoin support on LND, and I think that's so awesome. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and you guys help as well, so we're appreciative of that.
Cool. Yeah, and I think Jimpo, he actually merged a PR into Bitcoin Core. And so there's something about compact block filters. Yeah, and so what was some of the reasons why people got so excited from the Lightning community?
Yeah, so there's a developer, his name is Jim Posen. He was formerly at Coinbase, and he's now actually at Stanford. And he was very engaged and involved in the process. Of course, LND is open source, anyone can contribute. We at Lightning Labs are the lead developers on the software, but we've had contributions from all over the world, which is incredible, and part of why it's so great to be involved in the open source community. So Jimpo was working on Bitcoin Core Neutrino support. So Neutrino is the Lite client, as mentioned. So if you're going to run Lightning on a phone, you don't want to download, you don't want to have a full node on a phone. You just can't. You don't want to have to download the entire blockchain on a phone. So Neutrino is a better type of Lite client as opposed to previous ones that has far greater user privacy, where there isn't data leakage of user transactions to a server the user's connecting to. And what Jim was doing in it was one of the important things that need to be merged to bring Neutrino to Bitcoin Core. So with LND, we have support for BTCD, LTCD, Bitcoin Core, and I think Litecoin Core. And so what this merge was one of the first steps of bringing this technology, which is the Neutrino Lite client technology, to Bitcoin Core as well. So that was a big deal, and people were excited about it in the Lightning community.
Cool. Yeah, and I don't know if you guys listen to podcasts, but I highly recommend Noted with Pierre Richard and Bitstein. I think they had Lightning Koala and also...
Lightning Koala, creator of Satoshi's Place.
Yeah, from creator of Satoshi's Place, and also some from Chain Code Labs, James. And they kind of break down the difference between compact block filters and why they're so beneficial. Yeah, and so speaking of Neutrino and Lite clients and stuff, so what is it? You guys recently released an app last week or earlier this week?
Earlier this week. We've had 2 releases in 1 week, so
that is nuts how fast you ship.
Well, it took a while to get there, but
right. Yeah. So what are some main features that we can look forward to the Lightning app?
Yeah. So one thing we noticed is, one of our goals with Lightning more generally is to create a better user experience. If you have to wait 10 minutes for your transaction to clear, or if, on chain, if fees have spiked, then maybe it might be quite a while. That can be bad for the user. What if you want to send a smaller amount, but and the fees are, we don't know exactly if they're going to be high or low. With Lightning, you can have very low fees. When people were sending 1 Satoshi, the fees are actually less than a Satoshi. And LND and Lightning, the Lightning Network supports millisatoshis. So actually thousands of a Satoshi. Now, of course, you can only actually have a Satoshi on chain, but you can't really only have one because there's what's called a dust limit of like 500 some odd Satoshis.
Sure.
But so you can actually have fees that are less than a Satoshi, which is really cool. So like many, fractions of a cent. So in terms of the app, the goal was to have a very compelling user experience and a design that was simplified, because we didn't want to overwhelm the user with all sorts of like data and information about what was going on. So our lead application developer, the one who's German and likes beer, Tankred Heza, and then we have a designer named Lee Gordon who we're working with, and then Valentine Wallace. Our app team all worked together to make this design. So we released it, and so far I think people have been very excited about just the clean user interface. Certain aspects of you can change between. Currently, we have Bitcoin support, but I actually just saw somebody in the Litecoin Slack said they're going to port the app to Litecoin.
Oh yeah,
the devs. Yes, exactly. Awesome. So you can actually switch from the UI if you want to actually have things denominated in your local fiat currency, but of course it'll be held in Bitcoin or when it's forked for Litecoin. And just various elements of keeping this clean UI. Now, the app uses Neutrino because we don't want people to have to sync an entire full node on their desktop. And soon, we're working on the mobile release as well. Now, of course, people are saying, why isn't there mobile now?
Right.
And we'd all really like a mobile app now. And so the reason is twofold. First, the Neutrino version in our latest release is mainly for testnet, because while it's made a lot of progress, we're very security conscious. We still have a little bit more testing to go before we ship Neutrino for mainnet for use with real Bitcoin. And then second, when we talked about in my talk how if Bob tries to cheat Alice, if Bob goes offline, if Alice goes offline and Bob is trying to cheat Alice, we need a series of what are called Watchtowers. And they are effectively servers on the network. They don't hold anybody's money, and there's actually a huge amount of privacy and anonymity, but all they do is they watch for cheaters, and if they see a transaction where somebody's trying to cheat, they broadcast a transaction. You might pay a tiny fee, but then you get all of your money back plus the cheater's money as well.
Okay.
So we need to build out the Watchtower infrastructure. And because mobile phones can go offline, say sometimes your phone will be offline for a week or more, we don't want to take the risk that somebody's phone would go offline. So Connor from our team is working as quickly as he can on building out Watchtower support on LND.
Yeah.
So the plan is to ship a mobile app soon. I don't want to give any exact dates.
So tomorrow?
Together with Watchtowers.
I'm just kidding.
We've had a crazy week, so I think we need to take at least one day off.
Yeah, enjoy yourself. Why not? Yeah, so that's awesome. I love how it's like a light client focused, and it'll enable more apps for people to kind of build on top of Lightning Network.
Exactly, and I know I mentioned a few in the talk, but for example, in addition to something like Y'all's, we've seen people build out, say, podcast micropayment sites or video payment sites. We've seen just all sorts of in-game payments. There was also Satoshi Plays Pokemon that somebody built.
Oh yeah, that was pretty cool.
Did you play that?
I tried to, but yeah.
Right,
yeah.
where you could pay I think at that point it was 10, there was inflation, it was 10 Satoshis, not 1 Satoshi, to make a move on the game. People are working on in-game payments. So there are all sorts of really interesting applications that people are building out, which is exciting.
Yeah, and so I guess kind of on that note, what kind of applications do you feel like Lightning Network is ideal for? Would it be kind of video streaming services, or is it just instant merchant payments or something like that?
So I don't want to commit. I don't want to commit to anything. Well, so what's so exciting to me about Lightning is it really is an all-purpose transaction platform in a way. Now, that said, these days, when I shown the network map, it was over $700,000 of BTC on mainnet Lightning, and we think that's high right now because this is beta software.
Right.
We told people, put in $20 worth, and not more than you're willing to lose. One guy came along at one point and put $350,000 of BTC on Lightning, and we were all like, okay, this is going to get interesting. And he was writing about it. I think he was kind of from the Bitcoin Cash world, but writing some interesting posts.
Yeah.
And he got all his money back. So
it was pretty fair critique for your article going through the whole process. But I was just saying, like, what kind of life must you live to just drop 350 B on
Do not
beta
recommend
software?
putting very large amounts in beta software.
Crazy.
Now, one important point to note as well is we also have limits in terms of channel limit and also transaction limit. And actually, I know we merged a few months back. The Litecoin limits had been pegged to the Bitcoin limits, so they were actually much lower than they should have been.
Couldn't buy anything.
Exactly. Sorry. So we got feedback from the community, and we modified that to actually then kind of reflect the proper values in Litecoin as well. But those limits are in place because this is beta software and because we don't want to see people putting like millions of dollars in transactions just yet. So now this is not a large volume transaction network. In the future, there are all sorts of potential possibilities once it's hardened and far more secure and all of that. But beyond that, I really do see, we've seen things, merchant payments, we've seen machine-to-machine type payments. I think we'll see more automation. Right now, it's still somewhat manual. It's like, if I want to send, I want to pay pixels on Satoshi's place, I actually have to do it manually. Right. But there's a lot more in store. Chrome extensions or generally browser extensions are important for, say, certain automated types of payments. Nick Szabo has famously written about micropayments and the concept that the overhead for the user is too high to just say, like, constantly click. So I think automation is really important. Of course, people often ask, well, why do you need, say, ultimately, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of transactions per second? And the answer I give is, well, that's not going to be for humans. It's going to be for machines. Now, humans might be browsing, but ultimately it'll be machines talking to machines. Actually, Taj, one of the co-authors of Lightning Network Payment, used to like to say 100% of machines are unbanked.
That's true.
Sorry for the humans that don't have access to financial services, but the goal is to bring this value transfer layer to machines. And then also in terms of exchanges, there are several exchanges that have been working on Lightning integration, accepting instant deposits and withdrawals. As mentioned, it won't be millions of dollars worth just yet, but I certainly see a lot of potential trading use cases. And of course, we have the whole decentralized cross-chain aspect as well. There have been some startups that have built. One thing that's really cool that we've seen over the past year is, we're Lightning Labs, we're a startup, we're building LND. We've seen quite a few startups build on LND. So there's now an ecosystem of, say, decentralized trading companies, obviously games and whatnot, but then also merchant processing companies that are then building on top of our technology. So there's this like meta startup community of LND and Lightning, which has been awesome to see.
I think like Casa Huddle, their Lightning in a Box is built with LND.
They're running LND as well.
That's why I think they can add both Bitcoin and Litecoin. That's pretty cool. Yeah, and I think banking the unbanked from a robot perspective is, I think, maybe that's what Satoshi meant in the long term.
But we also want to, bring access to financial services and this value layer to anyone in the world, right? You shouldn't need a bank account. So.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so one question that I hear about the Lightning Network is that it is blockchain agnostic. And that one of the things that people say is that, like, blockchain technology can be easily ported. And so could you kind of break down what that means, like what it means to be blockchain agnostic for the Lightning Network?
Sure. So Lightning, as you mentioned, can run on top of a variety of blockchains. We have been focused on Bitcoin because it was originally designed for Bitcoin, and we saw that there was a need, especially on the scalability aspect of Lightning. Lightning brings this application layer, it brings speed, it brings low fees and scalability, but there was a need for the scalability part. For the Litecoin side, it was really this SegWit aspect, also the similarities between Bitcoin and Litecoin that made it very appealing for us to port it over.
It's just super fast and easy, right? Because it's so similar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, but we, for example, I have a friend working on ETH LND. So there have been other communities. I know some people in, say, the Monero and Zcash communities are interested in layer 2. There's certain aspect of those chains that you couldn't just easily port things over. And I think maybe there are certain changes to the protocols that might need to happen. But yeah, Lightning, as conceptually as a technology, can really run on top of any major blockchain. But for now, we're focused on the Bitcoin and Litecoin angle because we see there's a need for that.
Yeah, cool. But I think even though that it is like blockchain agnostic, I still like your layer 2 is only good as your layer 1, right?
Yes.
So if like your layer 1 is like really susceptible to 51% attacks.
Well, let's say I create Starkcoin, right?
Yes.
And I control all of Starkcoin. And I, now have Lightning running on top of Starkcoin. Well, actually, that's not secure because exactly as you mentioned, Lightning is relying on the underlying base layer. And if that layer is not secure, then the transactions won't actually be secure on the second layer as well. So you're only as secure on Lightning as you are as on the base layer. Bitcoin is, of course, the most secure blockchain out there. Litecoin is not far behind. But for one interesting thing we've seen in the past few months as well is a lot of chains have been 51% attacked, or there have been a variety of other attacks. And it was the kind of thing where we knew this would happen, and a lot of us in the community have been telling people for a while, but then we see it actually play out in real life, and we were like, yeah, we told you so.
Yeah.
So there is something very powerful and important around having substantial hash power underlying a currency, because that is part of what is securing it, and that is also part of what's securing Lightning.
Yeah, and I think you'll have a hard time getting a Watchtower or something to open a channel with you if they can just reorg that transaction out and then the channel is totally gone.
Quick clarification, Watchtowers don't actually open channels with you.
Okay.
So you don't open a channel with them. They're actually a separate
they're
service.
just monitoring it. Okay.
But yes, a merchant or whoever you're transacting with.
Yeah, fair enough, cool. So I think we have a few more minutes left.
There's one other topic I want to talk about.
Yeah.
The next 6 months one.
Yes. Okay. So what is coming to the Lightning Network within the next 6 months?
Cool. So I definitely don't want to promise exactly when it's going to happen. So it might be a year. And actually, in our team, it's one of those things with software developers where it's like, oh yeah, it'll be ready next week, and the following week, and you're like, it's 2 months later, ready. But around that time frame, there's some very cool technologies that we've been working on in the community. So one of them is called AMP, Atomic Multipath Payments. And the goal of AMP is, well, with Lightning, you need channel capacity in a particular direction in order to send or receive, depending upon whether you're sending or receiving. And let's say you want to send a payment that is $100. Well, finding a $100 capacity right now may not be that easy, especially because we've told people don't put $100 yet on the network. What AMP can do is AMP can actually chop up that transaction, say into 5 transactions of $20 each, find paths to your end destination, and then it all happens atomically. So either it all goes through or it goes back to sender. And actually, that's really important for, say, the decentralization of the network, where you don't have to have these large nodes with tons of liquidity, because you can actually chop up these payments. And this will also help with, say, the efficiency of routing on the network. So that's in progress. We're hoping to get a blog post out and a demo out at some point in the near future. Watchtowers are also very exciting to me. So getting the technology out there that'll enable the mobile phone apps and generally greater security on the network, where you don't have to worry that if you go offline, your funds may be stolen. And one of the goals of Watchtowers is you shouldn't just have one Watchtower. Now, some power users might want to run their own and say at home, and that's totally fine. And something like the Casa node can ultimately do that. But the goal is, you can have a whole host of these Watchtowers and a variety of different, say, merchants or exchanges or, say, developers can run them. And then if you go offline, even if a few of the Watchtowers go down, some of them will still be up. So you have this extra added layer of security, which is really important as well. There's also a technology called splicing that we've been talking a bit about. And so the idea there is, well, you might want to top up a channel. So maybe you have $20 in your channel, and then you've spent it, and now you want to keep that channel open, because each time you open or close a channel, you need an on-chain transaction. And then you actually have to wait, and you pay fees. But actually, if you want to keep that channel open, you can have one on-chain transaction to then add to the existing channel, and then you already have the connections there. And then you can also do things like splicing out, so that we call that splice in, where you add, you top up. You can splice out. There are a few things that can be done there. You can actually take funds out of an existing channel and send it onward on chain and keep that channel open. Or you can actually close the channel entirely and send the funds onward in one transaction, which is important because then you don't actually have to duplicate transactions. But then in what we call a cooperative close, when Alice and Bob talk to each other and they just close the channel and they don't have to wait for the timeout periods, that can all happen in the same duration of a time, say closing a channel and sending onward, as a normal, say, Bitcoin or Litecoin transaction would typically, which is important.
Very cool. So I'm super excited, and I'll look next month for your next update.
Yeah, we're working as quickly as we can, but we also need to sleep. So
yeah, definitely.
We're trying.
Cool. Maybe we have time for one question. So does anybody have a question for Elizabeth Stark? I see a lady up in the front. Yeah.
We can do 2, because I think
we can do 2? Okay, let's do 2.
Can you explain quickly how confidence is established with Watchtowers? Like the Watchtowers, like how is the confidence established?
Confidence in what sense? In that they're going to stay online, or?
Security, because let's say if you have one Watchtower, could the Watchtower potentially be bribed?
Great question. Security in numbers. So you can have any number of Watchtowers watching channels. So you could have 1,000, you could have many more than that as well. So if one Watchtower doesn't broadcast the transaction, any number of other ones could do so, if that makes sense. So it's either a 1 or a 0. It's either they broadcast it or they don't. And if they don't, then somebody else could come in and do so. And I would hope that exchanges, merchants, people that are known within the community would run these. We have a great just general developer community, people who run them. So basically what just needs to happen is, in the case that you're offline, your phone's offline for an extended period of time, just one of those Watchtowers needs to broadcast a transaction. And to incentivize them to do so, they can take a small fee as well, which I think is important.
Okay, so I actually think we're out of time. I'm really sorry.
Oh.
She's going to be, hopefully she'll be here for the VIP meeting, so you guys can ask her your questions then. But thank you guys so much for your time. Why don't we give her a clap of hands?
Thank you.